What up, yo? Welcome back to Forever Backlog, the show where I review my gaming backlog as I go through it. Sorry it's been a while. I gave you some bullshit excuse, but you wouldn't care. And rightfully so. Don't enable me. Don't enable my bullshit. So let's jump right into it. Today I'm reviewing for you... Okay, wait, that's a bit too harsh right off the bat. Can we get like a decent reveal in first? Yes, for this video I'll be reviewing Mirror's Edge, one of the absolutely very best parkour games ever made. Mirror's Edge was developed by DICE and published by EA as a free tech demo, full-priced release on both PS3 and Xbox 360 in late 2008, with the PC version coming out only a couple months later. It plays like an action-adventure platformer, which is just a way of not calling it a parkour simulator. You'll spend most of your time running around rooftops and access shafts and dank basements, because in this dystopian future, the way to avoid government surveillance is to trade information via courier. Oh, excuse me, they're called runners. That's right, the man's rooting through all your texts. Better hire some inconspicuous dude jumping across buildings to deliver your messages. Personally, I don't want to think about a future where dick pics are delivered by hand. We'll address the story and the setting later on. First, let's get to the actual game. Much of the game's appeal, as you can see, relies on a somewhat unique presentation. It's played on a first-person perspective with no heads-up display or any other overlay. It also boasts a brightly colored environment with a heavy emphasis on color coding, meaning that your proposed superior perception as a runner makes it so certain paths and objectives are displayed in vibrant colors, most often red, so you have the ability to react and keep heading towards your objective. Not only is this an interesting concept in terms of keeping you moving in the right direction without having to tell you or have you look at a map, it also enhances the presentation where there's almost always a heavy contrast of colors between the background and your objectives. As for gameplay, you're pretty much getting the gist of it through the in-game footage. You jump, slide, crawl, and roll through your surroundings, all the while trying your best to chain your moves together and keep your momentum going. There's also a minor gunplay element. That is, if you manage to steal the weapons off of some armed bad guys that cross your path, as runners never carry weapons on them by default. The developers made a big fuss that this was not the focus of the game, however, that this is not a first-person shooter, which it is not, but it only begs the question, why include it in the first place? You can probably start to guess where this review is going, so let's be fair and first address some of the things this game actually does right. Well, as I mentioned, it is a gorgeous game, even to this day, which is no small feat considering it came out some 7.5 years ago. The presentation does start to get a bit tiresome by the end, but still, there is no denying that Mirror's Edge carries with it a look that makes it feel unique even today. It is also unique in its identity, as this was very much the first experience of its kind and there have not been many like it since. If nothing else, the idea of going against some of the staples of modern game design helps the game carve out that uniqueness for itself. And when it's at its best, Mirror's Edge does provide some fun gameplay moments, like when you're given sufficient open space to run and string several moves together. There's also something to be said about how the depth of view and the very naked display will give you a real sense of vertigo at times. The problem is that these moments are few and far between, or worse yet, not only are they sparse, but it feels like the very best concepts in the game are hampered by either unnecessary fluff or just some outright poor design choices. After the initial stages, how you run along your course is more about memorizing the stage than it is about recognizing the cues around you. Whereas the fun would be in being able to react to the course and adjust on the fly while still keeping the momentum going, the game forces you to stop and slowly inspect your surroundings all too often. Either that or you'll fall to your death, prompting a restart anyway. And this just might have been me, but I felt like there were way too many interior scenes. I think I only was able to get any enjoyment out of being outside. There's also the hilarious contradiction about weapons, how you don't carry any on you but are free to use the weapons you take off of enemies. This is justified by how, as a runner, your aim should be to avoid direct conflict with the enemy altogether, tactical evasion and so on, until the game starts throwing you into lobbies full of SWAT people armed to the gills where you're comically overmatched, where you have no choice but to start snatching up some rifles and shooting up the place yourself. And speaking of comical, not only is the story completely inconsequential and full of every cliche you can name, You never feel any appeal or drive to do anything that you're supposed to be doing. Now this is the part where I normally put in a spoiler warning as I get into the specifics of the story, but I feel like nothing encompasses the ridiculousness of the plot here like the very ending, and that's what I'd like to show you guys, that's what I'd like to go over. So instead of sticking that in the middle of the video, stay with me after the outro, after the video outro, and we'll go over it then so I don't spoil anything for anybody. And lastly, I feel like the controls weren't all that tight either, which doesn't do a game that preaches precision and timing any favors. Now I did play this on the PS3, I'm unaware if the PC experience is any better. So, as I'm sure you're dying to know, should you move Mirror's Edge up or down on your backlog? Okay, so no surprise here, I would say move it down your backlog. But despite me not liking it, it's still an easy game to recommend you try out for yourself. Not only is it short, it's one of those games where the first hour of play is really telling, so you can probably start to guess if you're going to enjoy the rest of the game or not. Plus, to its own credit, it still holds up beautifully today like I mentioned earlier, so there's really no rush here. It's funny because I played the demo for Mirror's Edge way back when and didn't think much of it. It was only when I saw so many people excited over the sequel announcement that I figured I'd give it a fair try, because I was under the impression that mostly everybody thought it was kind of meh. Turns out I didn't change my opinion much. Now this isn't the worst game in the world, not in the slightest, it's just that nearly all its shortcomings end up having some weird comedic value to them. I think what ultimately did this game wrong was how they enveloped a good initial concept in a layer of settling mediocrity. An example of this is how it feels they couldn't decide whether to make the gameplay a sort of realistic simulation type or a more forgiving, flowing sort of on rails type. Kinda like the platforming in the Uncharted series, and then ended up with a strange middle ground. Okay, enough gratuitous bashing, that's the review guys. Leave me a comment saying what you thought of the review, and what you thought of the game yourself if you've played it already. Leave us a like, subscribe, you know, as always, thanks for watching. Remember to stay after the video outro if you want to check out the ending of the game. Take care, and I will see you all soon. Okay, so here we go. So to set the stage for you a little bit, most of what passes for plot in this game involves your sister here being framed for murder by some tinfoil hat conspiracy, some big corporation conglomerate evil bad guys, which this guy pointing the gun here is one of the henchmen. So at this point, you've just climbed through this giant building crawling with these guards that you'll see here in a moment, and this is one of the guys that's revealed as one of the henchmen, and he's taking your sister away so she can be, dealt with. And so here's how the game ends. As you'll see in a second, you're surrounded by these guards. Yeah, these guys right here. And this is the very end of the game. So after a very literal cue from the end boss here, you decide to jump onto the helicopter there. None of these people actually hit. You kick him off the helicopter in a heroic act. For some reason, the helicopter then starts going apeshit and catching on fire and malfunctioning and spiraling out of control. Your sister will fall off and just for some reason barely manage to get on the edge of the building here. You also jump off. There goes a helicopter on fire for some reason. You manage to save your sister at the very last second, even though that's not how physics work. The helicopter explodes below somehow, some way. And here you are, you manage to cheat death and save your sister, and you both can be together again at last. Except, your sister is still framed for murder, you're still wanted as an accomplice, and yet you're treated to this final shot as this is a happy ending. Like, you're still wanted by the authorities, and you just added one dude to your kill list, so... And you'll see that all those guards that were there before shooting at you have magically disappeared. Nobody's chasing you. And let's just assume that everybody on that building disappeared. You're still wanted for murder. Your sister's still wanted for murder. The conspiracy is just still very much alive. That one dude you kicked off the helicopter was just one of the henchmen, one of the lowlives working for that evil conglomerate. and yet you're treated here to this title screen and roll credits as if this is an actual ending, as if everything's going to be okay. If anything, the situation is even more desperate now, but that's the end of the game. How does that even... there's no closure. Everything's fucked. Why? This game!